so let's get right to it. Why anti-Semitism? Why do people hate us so much? And we see this type of hatred displayed in all sorts of ways. Some people hate us in words. Some people hate us in actions. Some people hate us with evoking terrible, disgusting, revolting, historic symbols. And some people just make up lies. But why is it that people really hate us? So I'm going to present to you now 3 different answers from Jewish sources. Answer number 1 really comes directly from the Talmud. The Talmud, interestingly enough, compares 2 Hebrew words that really are not spelt the same way, but they sound the same way. Those Hebrew words are Sinai and Sin'ah. Sinai and Sin'ah sounds the same way, right? Sinai really refers to Mount Sinai. We received the Torah on Sinai, on Mount Sinai. Sin'ah in Hebrew does not refer to Mount Sinai, although the Talmud again connects it to Mount Sinai. Sinai in Hebrew means hatred. And the Talmud says very bluntly that the reason there is Jewish hatred is because of the Torah that we received on Mount Sinai. Ever since we received the Torah, people have hated us. Why? What's the connection? And that is because the Torah, as we all know, is a set of values, of moralities, of ethics that we have to behave by. When the non-Jew sees the Jew carrying this flag of morality, then that non-Jew might just hate us because it's, oh, you think you're moral? You think you're going to impose your values on me? We don't want to be so moral. It's reminiscent of what Adolf Hitler himself said. Adolf Hitler said that he hates Jews. He said this in an interview, that he hates Jews because they brought 2 things to the world. One is circumcision, and the other one is morality. Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of the great Jewish authors who's known for maybe best for marching with Martin Luther King, he said he was praying with his feet. I was reminded of that yesterday because there were 300,000 Jews or even more praying with their feet in Washington, D.C., as you may have heard. But he writes that it's almost like students in school hate the best student of the school, the A+ student, right? Because I don't know what type of student were you? Were you A+ or B- or F students? But if you were an F student, no one was an F student here, of course. But if you want an A+ student, let's put it this way, then maybe you don't like the A+ student too much because the A+ student really reminded the teacher, reminded everyone what you could be, but you weren't because you prefer to be than an A. So that is what the Talmud is teaching us here, that non-Jews may hate us, or some non-Jews may hate us because we remind them of the deficiencies. We are carrying this Torah that reminds them of the deficiencies, and Sinai therefore gave birth to Sin'ah. That's answer 1. You can talk about this, and you can disagree with that too. Answer number 2 really goes to another passage in the Talmud, a passage that, interestingly enough, was brought up during the Mendel-Bayless trial. I don't know if you're familiar with the Mendel-Bayless trial. The Mendel-Bayless trial was one of 3 trials in the beginning of the 1900s, late 1800s, beginning of 1900s, that really spread much anti-Semitism in the world. There were 3 trials. We're going to speak mainly about one. One was the Alfred Dreyfus trial in Paris, France, where a Jewish French soldier was accused of treason, of selling secrets of France, military secrets, to Germany. It was the enemy of France at the time. He was sentenced to life in prison, and he had a retrial and a retrial and a retrial, and after about 10 years, he was finally freed. Trial number 2 was here in America, the Leo Frank trial. Familiar with it? In 1913, an owner of a pencil factory in Atlanta, Georgia, was accused of killing a 13-year-old girl who was an employee of that factory, Mary Fagan. His name was Leo Frank. He was Jewish, the owner. He was found guilty. He was sentenced to death. So that sentence exists in Georgia. Eventually, the governor of the time, Governor Slayton, felt that there was some some inconsistencies in the trial, to say the least. So he community sentenced to something, I don't know if it helped him or not, but from a death sentence to life in prison. What would you have preferred? I'm sure. I don't know what's best, death sentence or life in prison. But his end was even more tragic. In 1915, 2 years after his sentence, a mob of some 30 angry men stormed the prison he was in. Familiar with the story? And they kidnapped him from the prison. The gates were wide open. It must have been an inside job. They took him to a forest about 150 miles away from Atlanta, and they lynched him to death. He was hung on a tree, and you can still find pictures of his body. By the way, in 1986, the state of Georgia posthumously pardoned Leo Frank, realizing that really he was not the murderer. He had nothing to do with it. He was accused of death just because he was Jewish. Again, anti-Semitism. In the year 2000, a journalist of the Washington Post did some research. He asked a simple question: who was part of that mob of angry men? You know what he found out? The Attorney General of Georgia was a member of that mob, an ex-governor, not the Slayton guy, John Slayton, but a governor of Georgia, the mayor of Marietta, Georgia, was part of that mob. So important people, which, by the way, I'm not going to get too much into this. I don't know why I'm going there, but going to the third trial soon. But it posed a big question, because some of these names, the mayor of Marietta, etc., they had their names on buildings and streets. So after he found that out, do you take off those names or not? Should? Well, they weren't taken off. But that's trial number 2. That spread anti-Semitism here in America. By the way, the KKK was about to die, about to dissolve, could not survive. And in 1913, this trial really revived the KKK. On the other hand, it also is the reason why the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL, was created. ADL was created because of the Leo Frank trial. Anyway, that's trial number 2. Trial number 3 is the trial I want to focus on that leads us to reason number 2 of why anti-Semitism, and that's the trial of Mendel Baylis in another part of the world, in Kiev, Russia. Back then it was Russia, today it's Ukraine, as we all know. Kiev, there was a Jew by the name of Mendel Baylis who was accused of stabbing to death a 14-year-old boy by the name of Andrei Yushensky. He stabbed him many, many times, and he was accused of killing him. Why? Because they said that Mendel Baylis needed some non-Jewish blood to bake matzah for Passover, the classic blood libel. So he found this innocent 14-year-old Andrei Yushensky, killed him, took some of his blood a month before Passover. This was in March of 1913, if I'm not mistaken. No, sorry, March of 1911. 1913 was his trial, and they were able to bake matzah. The classic blood libel, which existed for thousands of years. It started, by the way, do you know where the first accusation of blood libel started? In the year 1100, more or less, in Norwich, England. And ever since, it was used against us time and time again throughout history. But Mendel Baylis at first was not given a trial date, says the Soviet Union. They don't care. After about a year, they came to visit him and they said to him, we'll make a deal with you. We'll release you if you just admit guilt. Of course, Mendel Baylis said, no, I don't trust you. I'm going to admit guilt, and then you're going to have a reason to put me behind bars for life. Anyway, so he didn't accept the plea deal, but with world pressure, he was finally given a trial. This is the trial of the century in 1913. During the trial, a passage from the Talmud was brought by the prosecution. And the passage of the Talmud says as follows, I'm quoting verbatim, Atem koim adam, ve'enu mota olam koim adam, which means you are called Adam, you, the Jewish people, are called Adam. We'll translate the word Adam in a second. But the non-Jews, the nations of the world, are not called Adam. Now, what does Adam really mean? Adam could be translated as human being. That's what Adam means. Adam, human being. So the prosecution says, you see, the Talmud, your own Talmud says that Jews are called human beings, but non-Jews are not called human beings, which means that Jews really relate to themselves as human beings, but they relate to everyone else as subhuman. They're not human beings. And if you relate to someone as subhuman, then it's easy for you to kill that person. And that's why Mendel Bayless killed Andrei Yushensky, because he saw him as a mosquito, which is, by the way, what Hitler did to the Jews. He told everyone the Jews are worse than mosquitoes. You can read in Mein Kampf. By the way, the book Mein Kampf was just found in Gaza, as the President Herzog just showed, in the house of a terrorist with underlines, etc. But if you read that, you'll see that Jews are worse than mosquitoes. Once you start believing that, then just like you crush a mosquito when it bothers you, so too, it's easy to crush a Jew with no conscience whatsoever. So that's what the Talmud is doing. And this is what, again, was brought during the Mendel Bayless trial. Look, it says here in the Talmud, you are referring to Jews and Koim Adam. They are not called Adam in your eyes. They may be subhuman. Now, the chief rabbi of Moscow of the time was called to answer this terrible accusation. His name was Rabbi Yaakov Maza. Rabbi Yaakov Maza was really a hero of a man. Many ways, brilliant. I don't know if you're familiar with Leon Trotsky. Yeah, Leon Trotsky was Jewish. He was one of the reasons for the Russian Revolution. The leaders of the Russian Revolution, very, very anti-Jewish, even though he himself was Jewish. His real name was Lev Bronstein. At one point, Rabbi Yaakov Maza tried to convince Leon Trotsky not to be against the Jews. The Red Army was taking Jews at the age of 7 from their home and enlisting them. So he would try to convince them. And Leon Trotsky wrote back to Rabbi Maza, this is just to show you Rabbi Maza was. He wrote back, "What do you want from me? I'm not Jewish. Leave me alone." And Leon Trotsky, again, was Jewish. His name was Lev Bronstein. Rabbi Yaakov Maza replied so brilliantly. He said, "That's the problem. The Trotskys lead the revolutions, and the Bronsteins are paying the price," referring to his names. But Rabbi Yaakov Maza was called to defend this passage from the Talmud and to defend Mendel Bayless altogether. And he explained this passage in the most brilliant way, which is really the real intention of the Talmud. What does it mean when the Talmud says that Jews are called Adam and non-Jews are not called Adam? What he's referring to, the way Rabbi Yaakov Maza explained this, it's just brilliant. He asked the court, does anyone here speak Hebrew? No one speaks Hebrew. He says, well, I will tell you that in Hebrew, the word Adam is a word that cannot be recited in the plural tense. It only exists in the single tense, Adam, which means one human being. You can't say in Hebrew, Adamim, which would turn the word Adam into the plural tense. It just doesn't exist. You can't say it. It's incorrect Hebrew. So what the Talmud is referring to, this is what Rabbi Maza again explained, is that Jews consider themselves as one entity, as one Adam, as one body, as one soul. You can't pluralize the Jew. Non-Jews don't consider themselves as one body. And it explains, Rabbi Maza went on to say, why Mendel Bayless is on trial and a Jew at the other side of the earth cares about Mendel Bayless. He doesn't know Mendel Bayless. He's not related to Mendel Bayless, but he cares about Mendel Bayless. You know why? Because we Jews are one Adam, one body. And if one part of my body hurts, the entire body feels it. That's why that Jew, wherever he may be, in America or in Israel, feels right now the pain of Mendel Bayless. This is so true, by the way, right? We are sitting here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we feel the pain of our brothers and sisters in Israel. Some of us may not even be related to them. We don't even know anybody. But still, it hurts us because we're one body. Nations of the world are not like that. If there's a Russian that is suffering right now in Moscow, or Ukrainian better, suffering right now in Kharkov, does an American here in, I don't know, Waco, Texas, does he feel that pain? No, he's American, he's Russian, and they divided, not one body. And that's how Rabbi Maza explained this passage so beautifully and so brilliantly and so truthfully. By the way, Mendel Bayless was acquitted. A lot thanks to Rabbi Maza. He then moved to Israel. Israel with his family. He refused to be in the spotlight. He was offered movie deals, Broadway deals. He refused to. Eventually, though, he couldn't make ends meet in Israel. He moved to America, and he died here in America of a heart attack. Mendel Bayless today is buried at the Mount Carmel Cemetery in Queens, New York, in the same cemetery as, no, the Rebbe is Montefiore, but this is Mount Carmel, as Leo Frank. Leo Frank. Yeah. So two trials, two Jews that really gave their lives on Kiddush Hashem, and they buried in the same cemetery. But anyway, this passage might also explain another reason of why anti-Semitism. Because it could very well be, as many people are pointing out, that when non-Jews see Jews, they are seeing almost an unbreakable power. They are seeing not just one individual, but they are seeing through that one individual masses and masses of Jews, which in their eyes again makes the Jew now unbreakable, because there's such a force here that person is witnessing. And that force can create some animosity. Oh gosh, it's not one against one. It's one against so many. Oh, I feel threatened. I feel intimidated. So I'm going to go against you with hatred. I'm going to, galvanize the world against you. Such a force. There's an Adam that is too intimidating for me. That's another reason for anti-Semitism. A third reason for anti-Semitism is much more psychological. And this explains not necessarily the whole idea of anti-Semitism, but perhaps it explains why anti-Semitism among some Arabs, among the Islamic world. And that really goes back to the parsha that we read just 2 weeks ago. If you recall, Abraham and Sarah had an argument. Who won that argument? The Jewish husband or the Jewish wife? The Jewish wife, as always. The Jewish wife always wins the argument. It's been like that from the beginning of times. Sarah wins the argument. What was the argument about? Their son, Ishmael, is the father of all Arabs. Ishmael was of bad influence to Yitzchak, to their son, to Abraham and Sarah's son. Ishmael had a different mother. He had the same father, right? Now, his mother was Hagar. But anyway, they were living together. Ishmael was a bad influence to Yitzchak. So at one point, Sarah, the mother of Yitzchak, tells her husband Abraham, hey, that child that you have from Hagar, I don't like him. He's a bad influence to my son Yitzchak. Get rid of him. He says, I can't do that. He says, well, you got to expel him. I'm sorry. God reveals himself to Abraham and says that whatever your wife tells you, listen to her. That's the actual verse. Now, Abraham is forced to listen to her, and he expels Ishmael from his house. Ever since, there is what's called today in modern psychological terms, this intergenerational trauma. A trauma that was born when Ishmael was expelled from his home. A trauma that holds within it a lot of animosity towards Yitzchak, towards Sarah, towards Jews. You expelled us from our home. We may know this consciously or subconsciously, but we certainly hate you because of it. And that's yet another reason. Yes, Julie. Right. So the question was, didn't Ishmael do something in particular or something very specific that caused him to be banished? Yes, if you read the Midrash, he did some horrible things, from prostitution to idol worship. And therefore Sarah she wasn't just being mean. Yes, you're right. Exactly. No, good point. But anyway, that's still intergenerational trauma. And we are still suffering from it on both sides. One side, because they hit us because we expelled Ishmael. The other side, because we're being bullied, to say the least. because of this trauma. Anyway, these are 3 reasons. There are, of course, more reasons that we can go into, but these are the 3 major reasons that are being pronounced by Jewish sources. The big question, though, is what do we do then? What do we do about this anti-Semitism? Why it exists is less important of a question, because it exists. We can ask ourselves why, but it still exists. The better question is, what can we do about it? And for that, we have to go to yet another Jewish source, a source that speaks about the very first incident of anti-Semitism recorded in the Torah. Do you know what that is? Have you ever seen The Prince of Egypt? Seen The Prince of Egypt about Moses? Yeah, terrible movie. Was it so inaccurate? But it doesn't matter. Moses comes out of the palace. He's a prince. He's the Prince of Egypt. He comes out and he's horrified. Why? Because he sees a slave master, an Egyptian, beating up a Jew. Remember that scene? Well, it's in the Torah. What does Moses do? This is the first, again, incident of anti-Semitism. A slave master, an Egyptian, beating a Jew. That's right. He first looks to see that no one is watching him, and then he kills him. He kills the slave master to save the Jew. The question that the Midrash poses is, how did Moses kill this Egyptian? Now, there are 3 answers given. It's interesting because what type of a question is that? He killed him. We have to fight about everything. He killed him. But still, there are 3 answers. Answer number 1 is that he killed him with his fist, like a Muhammad Ali uppercut type of fist. Answer number 2 is that he killed him with a shovel. There were shovels. After the Jews were slaves, they were building pyramids. So he took one of the shovels and he killed him. Answer number 3 is that he killed him with the secret name of God. There's a secret name of God called the Shema Meforash. I don't know what it is. Maybe some of you do. But if you say it, it can do magic. And one of those things it can do is actually kill someone else, God forbid. Now, again, what does it matter how he killed? He killed him. But the answers here that we are given really point to 3 ways to deal with anti-Semitism. 3 ways that our ancestors have used in order to deal with anti-Semitism. Way number 1 is a fist. You beat me, I'll beat you back. We've seen that from the Warsaw Uprising, the Ghetto Uprising, remember that? Mordechai Nilevich, to the IDF. That's a one big, powerful, majestic, dare I say also, fist of the Jewish nation. Another opinion is, no, the fist is going to help you just to a certain degree. But that doesn't help too much, because they'll eventually hate you. They'll still hate you. You know the best way to fight anti-Semitism? To show the world what the Jew is truly all about. Build for yourselves synagogues, institutions, JCCs. Build for yourselves Jewish organizations and fill them with Jewish values. And then you'll show the world that the Jew is really a good person. And then maybe hatred will go away. That's another pathway that we've chosen throughout our history. That's a beautiful pathway too. Took a shovel, we built buildings. Answer number 3 is the voice of God, the secret name of God. And that we found mainly with in Bnei Brak or in Borough Park or in Williamsburg, in neighborhoods like that. Building is not too much for us. The fist is for sure not for us. What we'll do is we'll lock ourselves up in yeshivas. We'll study Torah all day long. We'll practice the voice of God. And that's what will eventually overcome the anti-Semitism and non-Jew. Which reminds me, by the way, of, I may have shared this before, but of Adolf Eichmann's hangman. Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi who was tried in Israel after being captured in Argentina by the Mossad in May of 1961. He was hung, right? He was found guilty and he was hung. The only person to ever receive the death sentence in Israel. The hangman of Adolf Eichmann was not allowed to reveal his identity for 40 years because, of course, we have many neo-Nazis out there who could have very well taken their revenge. So they asked him, please don't reveal your identity for 40 years. 40 years had passed not too long ago. And that's when he finally said, I was the hangman. And he told us a few secrets also. He said that, for example, as the hangman, he was also the bodyguard beforehand of Adolf Eichmann during the trial, he had to taste the food of Eichmann. You know why? Why? Exactly, because they told him, if you die, that's okay. We can substitute you, but we can't substitute Adolf Eichmann. So if it's poison and you die, that's all right. But anyway, so that's he's a Yemenite Jew. But by the way, it's interesting because you know what his profession is? He's a hangman, right? He's Adolf Eichmann's hangman. But you know what his day-to-day profession is? He's a shochet, a slaughterer of animals. He slaughters cows. He slaughters, it fits. But his last name is Najjar, Shlomo Najjar. Short guy with a little payas. Anyway, when he revealed himself, immediately many people wanted to interview him. He said, I'm giving my first interview to a German TV station. And he asked those German representatives of that German TV station to interview him, not in their studio, not anywhere else, but in the kollel where he studies every day, in the yeshiva where he studies every day. So you see his interview and you see people studying Torah behind him. And when I asked him, why did you pick this? He says, I want to show you Germans that no matter how much you try, the voice of the Torah is still well and alive. That's the third opinion. With the voice of God, with the name of God, Moses killed the Egyptian. These are three pathways we found throughout history. But I think that what we are finding, especially during these trying times, is something quite beautiful. And that is that those three pathways are finally, as they are supposed to, coming together. They are harmonizing together. We are seeing even those people who study Torah all day long go out and support the IDF and make tzitzit for IDF soldiers and so on. We are finding also those people in the federations and the JCCs do everything in their power to go and support our brothers and sisters in Israel. And we are finding finally those three pathways that were quite unfortunately distinct for so many years finally come together as they are supposed to. And that's why I think that maybe now for the first time, we can really deal a very big blow to anti-Semitism, to Jew hatred altogether. If we continue to work together with those three pathways, will we eradicate it? No. It will forever exist. Not just because haters will be haters, because that's the way God created the world. But we can finally show the world that indeed Am Yisrael Chai. We can show the world that no matter how much they hate us, we are well and alive and thriving. And we are thriving particularly because of those three pathways harmonizing together.